There's a virus plaguing video games right now. I'm not talking about microtransactions or loot boxes or season passes. No game actually worth playing has any of those. This is a virus that's found its way into good video games. I'm talking about overbearing, boring, lengthy tutorials. I get it, you gotta teach your customers how to play the game somehow, but is having them scroll through pages of instructions like they're putting together an IKEA coffee table the right move? The best way to get your players bored out of their minds right away is to bring any story, gameplay, or action to a complete halt and explain what this item does, how to use this move, when to dodge this, blah 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 blah. Maybe I don't have the intellectual capacity for it, but when I see that I have to scroll through multiple pages of a tutorial in order to move ahead, my eyes wander away from my TV screen and towards my shelf of games, wondering if I made a mistake by choosing this one to play. One way to guarantee that a player won't retain information is by overloading them with it. How am I supposed to remember that LB and A do this attack, but LT and X do this attack when that info was 7 pages back? Some games have their tutorials accessible through the menu at all times, which I guess helps, but if you have a player having to constantly stop the action to refer back to your spreadsheet of controls, you gotta know you messed up somewhere. But every once in a while you get a game that gets tutorials right. Not only does The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom get it gets it right over 100 times. Much like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom has dozens and dozens of shrines scattered over the map. They serve as bite-sized dungeons, introducing a mechanic, testing the player with it a couple times, and then rewarding them with a spirit orb. Okay, I know these are called Lights of Blessing and not spirit orbs, but it's been way too long with Breath of the Wild. I can't stop calling them that. Many of these shrines will focus on a specific aspect of the game's world or physics engine, and a lot of the time, the shrine will be introducing it to the player. But even if a shrine isn't the first time you see a certain mechanic, the game still has to treat you as if it is. This is because with Tears of the Kingdom's open, non-linear nature, developers have no control over what order you tackle each shrine in. So to be on the safe side, they have to design each shrine with the mindset that it's the first one you'll do once you're off the starting island. This is clearly a challenging task, and no doubt one that other developers wouldn't have been able to execute nearly as well as the Zelda team. But there's a few tried and true methods the designers use in order to close the gap and make each shrine approachable, and not littered with overbearing tutorials. First off, there's the subtitle of each shrine, which gives you enough of a hint as to what the puzzles are going to be about. It's not too much and it's not too little. From there, all the shrines follow pretty much the same formula. The first puzzle is as simple as possible and serves only to make sure the player has the knowledge they'll need in order to complete the more challenging puzzles. This might be using ascension on a platform, building a bridge, or using a Zonai device. Once the player solves the puzzle that introduces the mechanic without any distractions, the shrine can then proceed with confidence that the player understands how that mechanic works. The first room is the most important one of each shrine because it sets the player up to be able to solve the subsequent puzzles. It's the foundation of what the rest of the shrine will be, but actually it's even more than that. Yes, it lets the player know how the mechanics work, but in doing this it also serves as a hint for the more complicated challenges. Once you go through a few shrines, you get a good sense of the pattern. If the first room has you build a vehicle to get through it, you know you'll have to do that again, but with some added complexity in order to beat the shrine. And the most beautiful thing about this is, it does all of this without a single text box popping up, NPC interrupting you, or your sword coming to life. The game just gives you the tools and lets you figure it out. This also ups the replay value. It makes the shrines more accessible for experienced players. A player who knows how the mechanic works doesn't have to scroll through text in order to get to the part of the shrine that will actually make them think. They just solve the first puzzle, which should take a matter of seconds, and then immediately get right to the good stuff. After this first room, the shrine can then proceed by adding in twists and other elements to the mechanic that the player has already proved they understand. The whole thing is seamless, free of blatant tutorials, and respectful of the player's time. Well, most of them are. With every rule, there has to come an exception, and for the shrines, this comes in the form of these combat shrines. These aren't really puzzles, but combat lessons, teaching the player how to do some of the moves that are more obscure than just pressing the attack button. These type of shrines do feature more upfront tutorials than the regular ones, and while I don't really like them, I understand the need for them. When a player sees a spring bouncing, that's a lot more understandable than knowing you need to hold the right bumper and then press up on the D-pad in order to throw an item. While some experimentation with objects and physics should be encouraged, the designers can't reasonably expect players to fiddle around with different button combinations in order to find which one throws. So here, a text box is the way to fix this. I'd say the problem with these shrines isn't how they teach the players these combat mechanics, but it's the fact that you can stumble into them after dozens of hours of using whatever mechanic it is. Having your hand held through how to use Flurry Rush after having already used it multiple times feels boring at best and patronizing at worst. Maybe limiting these shrines to the Great Sky Island, or having a character in Lookout Landing teach them to you, would have been the better solution here. But at the very least, you can look at these shrines as an easy spirit orb, which are always welcome. Thankfully though, aside from these combat tutorials, Tears of the Kingdom adheres to the show, don't tell approach very closely. When you meet up with the sign guy for the first time, you don't get a pop-up telling you, "This is Addison, a member of Hudson Construction." Throughout your adventures, you'll find Addison on rebuilding signs, advertising stabilize the signs by all over the Legend of Zelda nearby. For help in your signposting adventure, you can help him keep the signpost up and purchase. He'll reward you with food, items, and Hyrule and taxes and fees may apply. No, you meet him, find out what he's trying to do, see the materials nearby, and then if you're over the age of 4, you can probably figure it out. Not everything has to be meticulously explained and spoon-fed. This mentality is true throughout the whole game, much like it was in Breath of the Wild. The game doesn't have to draw careful walking trails for the player in hopes that they don't stray from the beaten path. It puts you in the world, gives you your objective, and lets you approach it in any way you want. Trust in the player is something that more game designers need to have. Video game players aren't all idiots that need to be coddled. Some of them are, definitely, but not all. Especially in a time where a billion walkthroughs are accessible in a matter of seconds right through your phone, tutorials just get in the way. Movies don't have text boxes popping up explaining what's going on, and neither should games. Let the player experiment on their own, and even if they fail a few times, that'll just make the success all the more rewarding.